Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to MPAC's 8th annual convention. We're actually going to be celebrating not only our 8th annual convention, we're going to be celebrating MPAC's 20th year. We began in 1988 with a budget of $30,000, and if you want to call it an office, it was really some closet from a business office. And now, alhamdulillah, we are $1.5 million budget with 3 offices in New York, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles, California, with a Hollywood bureau in LA, government relations office in Washington, D.C., and a media relations office in New York City. So we say alhamdulillah, and we also say thank you for making that a reality for us in commemorating 20 years. And inshallah, all of you will join us for the banquet tonight as we celebrate our 20 years. This convention has the theme, New Era, New Role. And we actually picked that theme before we knew who was going to be President of the United States, because regardless, we felt at that time that we are going to be seeing new developments in terms of both foreign and domestic policy. We are going to see either the first African-American president or the first woman vice president. And as it turns out, we have the first African-American president, and we are in a new era. We will deal with the issues of the new presidency on this panel. The second panel will deal with the issue of how we're going to deal with political engagement and assessing our own political engagement. And then the third panel today is going to be on the aftermath of the Mumbai attacks and its repercussions on U.S. foreign policy. During the 5 o'clock hour, we'll have 3 parallel sessions. One dealing with donors' rights and charitable giving. One dealing with running for public office, as we see more and more young people very much interested in learning how to run for public office, be it school board, city council, state office, or even Congress. And then a third panel will deal with the issue of United States global engagement. So I hope you're going to be with us throughout the duration of these panels, because it's going to be very informative. During the evening, our banquet will have the launching of a new campaign that is really being initiated by some exciting individuals, Deepak Chopra, Salman Ahmed, who is a musician, and Melissa Etheridge, I'm sure many of you know her, have teamed up to launch a campaign called Ring the Bells of Peace. And tomorrow at 12 noon, they are going to synchronize and have this launching throughout the United States, but they're going to actually announce it tonight at our banquet. And then after that, we'll have an MPAC presentation and looking ahead, and then we will end with a keynote address by Rick Warren, a pastor here at Saddleback Church, who was actually the first who held a town hall meeting between then Senators Obama and McCain, and is now, as was announced earlier this week, going to give the invocation at President-elect Obama's inauguration in Washington, D.C. on January 20th. So it's going to be a very packed day, and inshallah you'll have enough stamina, you'll get breaks, and we have wonderful refreshments here and across the street. And I see already we have been greeted today by some protesters. So a lot of people are taking notice of MPAC, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and the work it does. In fact, somebody also told me that it was announced on Channel 2 News and CNN that we're having this convention here, and Rick Warren is going to be the keynote speaker at the convention tonight. This panel is going to be looking at the new American president, President-elect Obama, and some of the challenges and opportunities with this new president. There are going to be a number of national and international issues that will be at his desk immediately after he takes office on January 20th. With an economic crisis here, with civil rights that have been a major concern for the last 8 years, whether it involves due process and the denial thereof, or secret evidence that is being compiled against individuals, or torture, the civil rights and returning to the Constitution are going to be major issues. And then trying to restore international credibility, as America's image has deteriorated for so long. We really have no credibility anymore with a number of countries. Case in point is what happened in the country of Georgia, where there was definitely an invasion by the Russian troops. And as soon as our president and our Secretary of State had pointed to a violation of international law, we were really seen as hypocrites in trying to point out the violation of international law there, whereas we had ourselves invaded Iraq and did exactly the same thing. So the war on Iraq has really deteriorated our image and credibility internationally. So I'm sure that our panelists will cover many of these issues and more. This is quite an esteemed panel. Each of them will speak for 20 minutes, and then we're going to be asking for your questions on cards that will be brought up here, and we'll be asking them to engage in a discussion after their presentations. First panelists, I'm going to announce all three, and then they will come one after the other. And really, much of the information is in your program about their backgrounds, and there's much more that is not in your in the program, but I'm sure with Google and all this other gizmos that people have, you can do background checks on practically anyone these days. The first panelist, though, is going to be Dr. Maher Hathout. He's the senior advisor to the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And really, Dr. Hathout has advised practically everyone in this country. He's advised members of Congress, he's advised presidents, he's advised families and communities. He has been a leading thinker even among Muslim American organizations in terms of the progress here and our role here in the United States of America. And he is the one who coined the term, the American Muslim identity, that means home is not where our grandparents are buried, but home is where our grandchildren are going to be raised. And now everybody's using that term throughout the Muslim American community. After Dr. Hathout, we'll have Ahmed Younis, who's now senior analyst for the Gallup Center for Muslim Studies and Muslim West Facts Initiative. Ahmed is definitely no stranger to MPAC. He was our national director for quite some time in Washington, D.C., and now he transitioned to the Gallup Center, and we're very proud of his work and very proud that he had his beginnings here in our community and in particular with the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Whenever you see Ahmed speak, he is an able speaker in terms of putting the context of what the American Muslim identity is in terms of any issue, and he effectively debunks the myth of the clash of civilizations. And the facts and data that he gathers from Gallup now illustrates the democratic aspirations of Muslims worldwide. And he plays a very important role in not only providing analyses to several American public officials here, but being that bridge between the United States and the Muslim world. Our last presenter is Professor Juan, who's a professor of history at the University of Michigan. His articles and his interviews have been very refreshing, especially in the last 8 years, because everything that he has said is really representing the conscience of the American people and a critique of the policies of torture and civil rights violations and constitutionality in terms of the policies of the last 8 years. He'll be also analyzing what our next president is going to be faced with, and is very able in terms of putting things within historical context. So with that, could we all just give a round of applause for our three panelists right now? See how generous we are. We applaud you even before you speak. And with that, I'd like to invite our first presenter, Dr. Maher Hathout.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. Salam advised you to check on our backgrounds. If you want, please don't. Just take us on face value. I'm very happy to be speaking with you today, and I want us to appreciate that this is a panel discussion, not a lecture. So those who have the dreadful feeling that here is Maher Hathout will give a lecture, it will not be that case today. Will be friends and fellow citizens talking with each other. And I am very happy to be with, and actually honored to be with Ahmed, Younis, and Professor Cole on the same panel. Really, the worst thing that can happen to any group of people is they keep working very hard to discover that the field they are working within is no more, is a different field. So I think it is very important that we appreciate that there is a change and we should be challenged, that we should change to cope with the change. Otherwise, we'll fall very, very easily into irrelevance, something which is the killer of ideas and actually the demise of organizations and civilizations. So what I'll try to do today very shortly and very briefly, hoping that we can elaborate more in the discussions, is to explore that. There is no doubt that whichever way you wanted to slice it, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or an extreme Republican or extreme Democrat, no doubt that there is a change in the United States, and this change is ushered by the election of Barack Obama. So whichever way you want to think about it, America of tomorrow will be different from America of yesterday and to today. It will be the job of analysts and sociologists and scholars to try to give us the forecast and to try to study what kind of change, what shape will America have in the coming few years. I limit myself, I extend my imagination to only 10 years, one generation from today. The expectation is that there are issues will be less important than others. There are issues that will be eclipsed, and there are issues that will be hot and very palpable. The more difficult job is, and this is the Muslim Public Affairs Council, so we're talking about the Muslims, is how Muslims will be aware and will change to cope with the new realities. I think that if that change happens in the direction that A, we hope for, B, that was promised. And I stress the second one because the majority of us were very excited by the election of Barack Obama. I came from places, from an origin, from a country that taught me the hard way to be very skeptical. And so the moment you elect the hero and you make the hero a hero and you follow the hero will disappoint you. In our Islamic culture, what makes a person a chief is that he serves, following the saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, khadimul qawmi sayyiduhum. The servant of the people is actually their master. So from that perspective, it is very important that we consider ourselves included in the equation so that we see into it that what was promised is fulfilled. Otherwise, we give the other face of the coin of a failing democracy. We saw one face of that coin already in the past 8 years. The other face of the coin can be what I'm talking to you about, to get someone and you don't hold him accountable, not to your ambitions, no, but to his promises. He articulated certain promises. He should be answerable to the American people about the promises that he articulated. And this is only fair. Otherwise, the democracy will be a fake one. If that change takes that direction, then we Muslims have to undertake major change. Number one, in psyche and in attitude. That will then be translated in rhetoric. That will then be translated into activism. But it all starts by our outlook to life and to the country should be different. Let us face it, since 9/11, Muslims, with their all colors of the rainbow, were on the receiving end. We receive things. Some of these things are good, like empathy and curiosity and trying to understand. Some of these things were very bad, like Islamophobia and prejudice and trampling of human rights, etc., and civil liberties. But in either case, we were receiving. And when you are in the receiving end, you have already been framed. The debate has been already framed, that you have either to ignore or to react or to get angry or to fight. When you are in the receiving end, or to cheer. But you don't have an initiative on your own, because you are there and things are thrown at you, the good and the bad. You have to cheer the good and defend against the bad, in whichever ways of defense it depends on the intelligence of the people who are dealing with that. I think that paradigm ought to change. We have to shift from the receiving end to insisting on being on the giving end. This is the major issue, that Muslims with other Americans should be constructively engaged to build an America which is different from the America of the last 10 years. So we are not anymore receiving, and we should, and my strong recommendation, they call me the senior advisor, which means I advise, nobody listens. But my advice that I stress to the Muslims, you insist on not defending, not responding, not whining, not complaining, not feeling victimized, but insist that you roll up the sleeves with others and build a different America. And there is an opportunity for us to do that. It seems that there is an opportunity for us for the first time. For the first time since, I would say, 9/10. Because from 9/11, that glimpse of hope that we will be integrated part, building part of America was demolished with the two towers. Now we have an opportunity that we insist to be in the constructive mode. If that attitude changes, our rhetoric then should change. We should no more be neither the angry, nor the whining, nor the complaining, nor the withdrawing, nor the cheerleader. The rhetoric itself should change to be in articulation of what we believe can be good for America, as part of our mission to life as Muslims, that we are supposed to enjoy what is right and forbid what's wrong, and believe in God. So all our talks and all our books and all our articles should go into that direction, trying to be part of the solution, trying to suggest the solutions, try to add to the productive debates of the country. This will take us, as I said, it will be from psyche and attitude, from frame of mind to rhetoric to actual actions. My recommendation to myself and to all is stop building mosques. That phase is over. Stop making the petty projects for Muslims, home for Muslim children, for Muslim elderly, let us build things for America. And our projects that we get engaged in, from the social to the economic to definitely political projects, should be through building positions and situations for us in the political and social and the economic arena in the United States. So we add to the pluralism something of value. This is, people will say, easy to say. Number one, it's not easy to say. Number two, it might be difficult to do, but there is no alternative. But irrelevance. And I'm sure that we will not be irrelevant in this country. Thank you very much. That's to go around Africa.
Actually, Dr. Hathout, I find myself going around Africa like 3 times a month just to get back to Washington and my job. Yeah, there's pirates there. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a great honor for me to be with you, and I really want to focus on just offering just a few thoughts in as few minutes as I possibly can, and maximizing the amount of time that we have together for conversation. In the 1950s, when we at Gallup asked the American people whether they believed or encouraged the marriage between a black person and a white person, 7% of the country said they do. That's in the 1950s, 1952 actually. When we ask that exact same question today, 92% of the American people say they approve of the marriage between a black person and a white person. So there is something inherent in the American character. There is something germane to the American narrative that necessitates change. If you think about the founding of our country, women did not have the right to vote when our Constitution was written. A black man and a white man were not valued as equal when our Constitution was written. That doesn't mean that that Constitution is thrown out to the door, but it means that inherent in its structure, in the procedural mechanisms of its development, are avenues for change, are avenues for contribution by the people, are opportunities for a change in perspective on, tolerance, morality, what is good, what is wrong in society. So we have that going for us. We have the fact that we as a people are inclined towards change. And we can say certainly as a point of departure that the next American president is a great man who in himself carries a beautiful portrait that reflects the great diversity and uniqueness of the American narrative. We can say that there is great hope and optimism in our nation. I would even say, as someone that lives in Washington, D.C., even amongst the most cynical, there is great hope for change, and there is great hope for new structures, new paradigms that yield to the American people an experience that, of course, is very similar to the one we've had until today in the 200 or so years of our nation's story, but are changed in those ways that are most important. This morning I suffered from a little bit of jet lag, so I was kind of on a little piece of paper trying to scratch out where I've been in the last 3 months. And of the 27 countries that I visited in the last 3.5 months, I can certainly say that there has been a great appetite for change, a great appetite for a new American experience, a new American courtship, a new relationship wherein which we dignify and respect the people of the world with their diversity of perspectives, with their diversity of life, with their diversity of paradigm. So there's a ripeness, if you will, an appetite for all of what we are talking about today. But we are sobered as Americans by the many challenges that we face as a nation. An economy quasi in collapse. A recession that has not only reached the people of this country at the working class level, but has reached the richest of us. Bailouts from the federal government that are aimed at saving a collapsing economy. Bailouts for industries that in the 50s, in the 40s, defined this nation's character at home and abroad. We're challenged by education systems that are dilapidated, an inequality between a young black or a young Latino student and a young white student in different parts of the country. My law degree is from Washington and Lee. I know very well that there are scores of white Americans that live in education systems whose children go to schools that do not have books. The healthcare system does not cover them because they are not privileged enough to be covered. Attempting to underscore that this is a post-racial, a post-identity crisis. The crisis that we face as a country today is not just about black people or white people. It's about all of us as Americans. It's not about the poor or the working class. It's about all of us as Americans, and it affects us in a very significant way. For American Muslims, there is a unique challenge when we poll the American people and ask them their opinion of religious groups. We find that American Muslims are the most negatively viewed religious group in the country. The only people doing worse than Muslims are atheists and Scientologists, actually. In our regression analysis, we find that if when we poll you, you admit to an unfavorable opinion of Islam, the data says that that makes you 18 times more likely to admit when asked to extreme prejudice against Muslims. So if you have an unfavorable opinion of Islam, you are 18 times more likely to admit when asked, only when given the opportunity, admit to extreme prejudice against Muslims. If you know the name of the Prophet Muhammad, so we used to always say, if you know a Muslim, it's totally cool. If you know a little bit about Islam, it's totally okay. If you know the name of the Prophet of Islam, you are 1.9 times more likely to admit to extreme prejudice against Muslims than if you do not know the name of the Prophet of Islam. So just according to the science, the stimulus that exists in the public square vis-a-vis Muslims is something that very much is to be taken with a sober and a cautious note. When we look abroad, our nation has great challenges. Although certainly there is great excitement for the president-elect, when we polled during the election, there was not a single majority in a single Muslim majority country that wanted Barack Obama to be the president of the United States. The vast majority of response is, I don't know or refuse. Who would you rather have, John McCain or Barack Obama? I don't know or refuse. Certainly amongst the intelligentsia, there's great excitement for Barack Obama. I mean, we go to conferences all the time. Salam and I were in Doha, Qatar last year, just this time for the Brookings conference, and they just took a round of hands in a 200-person conference between people from the Muslim world and people from the West. They just took a round of hands. How many people here would vote for Barack Obama if you had the chance? How many people would vote for Hillary Clinton? I mean, there were literally 3 hands that were not for Barack Obama. So amongst the intelligentsia, certainly there is an appetite for Barack as an individual, but at the level of the people, there was not this yearning for this individual. Why? Because when you ask those people, is the US serious about the establishment of democratic systems of government in your country, the majority of every single Muslim country except one say no. When you ask them, is the US serious about allowing the people of this region to fashion their own political future, the majority of every single Muslim majority country says no. You see the difference between those 2 questions? The first one had the word democracy in it, the second one didn't, and the responses are exactly the same. When you ask those people, is the United States serious about the creation of good quality jobs in your country? The vast majority of the respondents in Muslim majority societies say no. So yes, Barack Obama is a great man. And yes, Barack Obama brings us to a new moment in American life, in the American experience. But there are fundamental challenges that we as a nation face. There are structural difficulties in our ability to move beyond the moment within which we live. The grievances of Muslims globally vis-a-vis the United States fall quite neatly into 3 buckets. Perceptions of political domination, a relationship between the United States government and the non-democratically elected government of that people, and a perception by the people that the United States is a catalyst in the lack of freedoms that they experience on a regular basis. Number two, acute conflicts, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. And number three, a sense of cultural disrespect. Cultural disrespect. Muslim perception of American perception of Islam and Muslims. So we're engaging in public diplomacy projects, which I was very much a part of during the Bush administration, and I'm proud of that. We engage in public diplomacy projects within which we're going to the world to tell them about ourselves. Well, it turns out that we're supposed to go to the world and tell them about themselves, tell them about their own opinions. Why? Because as Salam alluded to earlier, we as a nation must move into a post-clash paradigm. Those three circles, cultural disrespect, political domination, acute conflicts, if you see them in a Venn diagram, you see them connected to each other. There is a concentricity. They are concentric circles. They touch each other. They overlap with each other. Why? Because if I'm a young man in Egypt, and you ask me, what do you admire most about the West? I, like all of the Muslims in the world, I respond as follows in fill-in-the-blank questions. Number one, technological advancement. Number two, a combination of liberty, democracy, and participatory government. By the way, when we ask Americans the same question, what do you admire most about the West? They say number one, freedom, democracy, and participatory government, and number two, technological advancement. But let's leave that to the side. So if I'm that individual and you ask me what do you admire most about America, I tell you freedom. Your freedom is what I admire most about America. But I notice that you have a relationship with the government under which I am living that has yielded to them the ability to deny me a certain component of freedoms. And I seem to notice that the reason that you have this relationship with that government is because of the presence of an acute conflict that's right across the street, called the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is the paradigm of the people at the grassroots. I'm not telling you what Ahmed Younis believes. I'm telling you what the people at the grassroots, according to the data, believe. So I perceive it to be because of this acute conflict that's right next to me, and I consistently feel disrespected by you because every time you ask me what do I admire most, I say freedom, and you are continuing to act in a way that does not yield for me or the people around me in my country those types of freedoms. So the United States of America has a great task ahead of it. Abroad, we must emerge from a clash of civilizations paradigm. There was once a day when we didn't have data. And there were only people like Juan with great analysis and great books and an amazing blog that were speaking to many of these issues. Today we have data. So what I am speaking to you today is the voice of 92% of the global Muslim population. It's not Ahmed Younis's cute fabrications of ideas. If we use that data as the American people to reassert our perception of the people of the world, primarily Muslims, and their motivation. When we ask Muslims around the world, do you believe 9/11 was completely justified? 7% say yes. Then we ask them in the fill-in-the-blank question, why do you believe 9/11 was completely justified? Not a single answer from all of the countries within which we poll is sourced in religion or religiosity or piety or the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad said. It's all politics and policy. I'm a kid from LA. I never get to see LA anymore, but I'm a kid from LA. Much of what I studied was about Latin America, beef between the United States and Latin America throughout the last 50 years of our lives. It sounds exactly the same. The analysis is exactly the same. When we ask the 93%, why is 9/11 unjustified? All of the answers are sourced in religion and religiosity, to the point where we have questionnaires within which people write verses from the Quran. The killing of an innocent life is like the killing of all of society. The difference between the people that believe that 9/11 was completely justified and those that don't, there's absolutely no difference in their religiosity. How often they attend a religious institution, and when you ask them how important is religion in your daily life, they have the exact same answers. In fact, so hear me now, let's throw this really cold cup of water on the clash of civilizations. In fact, amongst the 7% amongst the 7% that say 9/11 was completely justified, they are 15% more likely to say that democracy will yield to the people of their region the freedoms they deserve. Those are the guys that are saying it's okay that they flew planes into buildings. So we as a nation must emerge into a post-clash paradigm. That post-clash paradigm must articulate to the people of the world how we speak to them. You know, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said something very beautiful. Everything he said is very beautiful, but here's one of them. The Prophet said, خَاطِبَ النَّاسَ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. Speak to the people on the wavelength of their mind. When you speak to people in their language, you respect them. And when you respect the other, you are in the most powerful place that you could possibly be. When you speak to the people in their language, you dignify their presence as equals. And an equal is much less likely to approach you with violence than approach you with reason. But this post-clash paradigm doesn't just apply abroad. It applies here at home. And this will be my last comment, Salam, because I know you're looking at your watch. Thank you, sir. There is a literacy that serves as a prerequisite to the knowledge required to lead global movements of change. You must be literate in two things: yourself, your nation, the core narrative of its experience, its great diversity. You must know very well, as though you lived it yourself, the worst of the American experiences and the best of the American experiences. You must know yourself before you engage the other. And number two, you must know the other. You must insist on allowing the other to define themselves, to define their worldview, to define the paradigm from which they are engaging you. And you must do it while you are constantly waging a war against your comforts. It's comfortable for me to believe that those guys hate us for our freedom. There's a bunch of crazy bearded fools that hate us for our freedom. That's comfortable, that's easy. I could do that one. But when you push yourself to know the other, you are fulfilling that second component of those two things that we fundamentally believe are necessary prerequisites to global movements of change. Dr. Hathout said, the change promised will not come from a hero. So I'm just gonna transport myself to 17 years old, and I'm gonna say, I wanna agree with him in a very disagreeable way. You're right, the change promised will come from a hero. It will come from a hero, but that hero is not Barack Obama. That hero is you. And the only thing that proves what I'm saying is that Barack Obama says what I'm saying. In my humble judgment, Barack Obama has done much more than we can ask of one human being. The door is open. Blow through it. Throw it off its hinges. Bring change like you've never seen it before. Bring beauty to America and goodness and progress and an ability to engage the world that Barack Obama cannot create by himself. Fix these schools, fix this healthcare system, have interfaith activities, support the Muslim Public Affairs Council. These are things that we must do as Americans in order for this beautiful man from Chicago and the people that he has assembled to be able to succeed in the ways that they have promised they can succeed. But they never said they could do it on their own. They always said they couldn't do it without us. So now is your moment. And you are the heroes that America is looking for to bring about the change that is necessary. There is a quotation from the Federalist Papers that I used to say in every single speech when I was MPAC's national director. It goes like this. Let me see if I can even still remember it. Maybe Salam can help me. It seems to have been left to the people of this nation by their conduct and example to determine the question whether man will forever be destined to be ruled by fear and force, or whether we can build a constitution, a way of life amongst ourselves that is sourced in reflection and choice. That is our mandate today, as we look to the future, to yield to the American people a life that is sourced in reflection and choice, and to yield to the people of the world with our great power and might. Not just the might of weapons and the might of dollars, but the might of the core American narrative and what sits within the hearts and minds of the American people to yield to the people of the world a life that is sourced in reflection and choice and not in fear and force. You are the heroes of that mandate. And that mandate doesn't come from, some random person. It comes from one of the founding fathers of our country. Great respect. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thanks so much to MPAC for this kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. Every Muslim country has its own specialty. The Egyptians are the stand-up comedians of the Muslim world. I once saw an Egyptian serial in which there was a very westernized young woman, and she was talking to her very traditional grandmother. And she came into the house and she said to the grandmother, "Hi." And the grandmother looked at her and said, "Hi, wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh." It seems to me the MPAC conference this year exemplifies that meeting of cultures. And when we talk about the impact of the new President Barack Obama, and I just wanted to remind you all, this is our panel discussion today at this hour is on the new president. What's the date today? It's only a month. It's like a dream. It's 30 days. It's only one more month, and this long nightmare will begin to be over. And when we talk about the task of the new president, the new administration, let's just remember a little bit about what we've been through. We've been through a period in which the main response of the United States government to a terrorist attack from Hamburg, Germany, was to invade Iraq and occupy it until now. We've been through a period in which the President and the Vice President of the United States hinted around heavily that Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden slept in the same bed every night. When all the good intelligence showed and mere common sense, knowing anything about the region, would show that secular Arab nationalist Ba'ath Party, far-right, hyper-radical fundamentalist Al-Qaeda, not really that much of a good fit. Implausible things were alleged, and national and global policy were made on its basis. We've been through a period in which, in the recent presidential election, the entire ranks of the Republican candidate field were dedicated to denigrating Islam. They denied it. But I think the Republicans really, really miss the Soviet Union. It was a great tragedy for them when it fell apart. I mean, it was a victory in a way, but then, after a while they began to wake up and realized that they'd lost their ace in the hole, because the Republican Party has been about scaring Americans about the rest of the world. And you can't really scare them very effectively about most things, but the international communist conspiracy, of which apparently Democrats were a part, that was the allegation that Nixon and others made. That was a wonderful plot device for the Republican Party. And after 9/11, they kind of felt, well, maybe we've got it back. Maybe the mojo's working again, and this time it's not the red menace, it's the green menace. there's a lot of problems with going in that direction. One is that, you know, communists were not a racial group in any way. And you had European communists, you had Germans, you had Russians, you had Americans, you had all kinds. And they were also not, you know, a group recognized in society with rights. They were a political party. So being anti-communist could be done without looking like you were the Ku Klux Klan. But when you take up Muslims as the enemy, as I think, without any doubt, that's the subtext of Rudy Giuliani's campaign. In fact, he castigated the Democratic candidates. He said, they're all afraid of talking about Islamic fascists and Islamic terrorists. He said, who would be offended by that? Well, let me just explain to Mr. Giuliani that in English diction, as well as in the Middle East, Islam is a religion which is about ideals. So we talk about Islamic ethics, we talk about the Islamic scripture. It's about ideals. Now you can have a Muslim, which is the proper adjective that Giuliani is looking for. You can have a Muslim burglar. You can have a Muslim criminal, you can have a Muslim terrorist. That's fine. You can't have an Islamic burglar. He's not acting out of the ideals of the Islamic religion when he's, you know, pilfering things. So the reason, Mr. Giuliani, that people would be offended if you talked about Islamic fascism or Islamic terrorism is that it's the wrong diction. It implies that it's connected to the essence of the religion. And mind you, you would never talk about this in other religions, so you wouldn't say in polite American diction, Judaic terrorism, as opposed, I mean, there can be Jewish terrorists, but you wouldn't say Judaic because that has to do with the ideals of the Jewish religion, and you wouldn't say that General Franco in Spain, who was rather tight with the Catholic Church, was a Christo-fascist. I mean, that would be extremely offensive. But Giuliani got away with saying these things. And then Mitt Romney in his presidential campaign, at one point, let me get you the exact quote, just a second. At one point he said that he objected to the Democrats talking about Osama bin Laden all the time. He said it's not just Osama bin Laden. He said that it's about, I can't find it, but he said it's about the Muslim Brotherhood and Hezbollah. It's about Sunni and Shia and the desire for a caliphate. So let's get this straight. The Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt, which is a political party that participates in elections and has 88 members in parliament, is the same as Al-Qaeda, which is a terrorist organization. And both of them are the same as Hezbollah, which is also a political party that is in the Lebanese cabinet, which has been designated by the Lebanese government to defend the south. And the Sunnis and the Shiites are the same, and both want a caliphate. I mean, I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Shiite branch of Islam developed because they didn't want a caliphate. So Romney sounded like he knew what he was talking about, right? But in fact, he jumbled it all up and had no idea what he was talking about. And it just goes to show a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. But the overarching point that Romney was making was that Muslims, in general, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, wherever they are found, whenever they're politically active, that's the enemy. That's the new Soviet Union. And of course, it's the most ridiculous thing that you could possibly imagine. First of all, I started thinking about this, you know, green menace trope in the Republican Party, and I thought, well, who are the friends of the United States in the world? Russia, not so much. China, I wouldn't exactly call it a friend. We do a lot of business together. Venezuela hasn't been talking nice about us. So there are 14, I think, non-NATO allies of the United States, plus NATO. Well, in NATO, you have Turkey, so one NATO ally, and then Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Morocco. They're all non-NATO allies. I mean, designated by the president allies. So that doesn't look very much like the Soviet Union. It looks like the Muslim world is where Americans' friends are. So President Obama comes to, or President-elect Obama, you can see how hard I'm waiting, comes to power at a time when Muslims have been tortured using the Quran and using psychological techniques of essentially blasphemy to break them at Guantanamo and Bagram, when Muslims have been targeted for frankly phony prosecution by the Gonzales Justice Department, which dirty tricks have been played, like naming unindicted co-conspirators. The Muslim Brotherhood, apparently, is an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation case. At a time when the United States has rampaged around invading Muslim countries and destroying, really, decades of American bilateral policy on cultivating friendships in the Muslim world. And he faces severe challenges. Now, I think that the Attorney General designate Eric Holder won't engage in the kind of shenanigans that Gonzales did on this front. And so I think we'll see an immediate improvement in this regard. With regard to civil liberties for Muslims in the United States and under an Obama administration. And I think the big challenges are foreign policy. Now, Obama has said a lot of the right things. He has said that he's going to get combat troops out of Iraq, that this Iraq misadventure, which has wrought so much destruction on the people of Iraq, is going to be over with. And Obama has, I think, had a stroke of good fortune that the Iraqi government is beginning to get its act together, and the Iraqi parliament has also asked for a withdrawal, not just of combat troops, but of all U.S. troops, is quite explicit about this by 2011. And I think that every evidence is that Obama will go forward with this. There is some danger that he'll get some pushback from his own foreign policy and military establishment. There's some evidence that the officer corps and Robert Gates, who continues as Secretary of Defense, are arguing that, well, wouldn't there be a way to somehow keep a U.S. base, say 40,000 troops in Iraq? And people keep thinking on the example of Germany and Japan, South Korea after those wars. Let me just explain something to everybody who doesn't know it. Like, Japanese don't like having U.S. troops in Japan at all. Like, it's very, very unpopular. So why do they have them there? It's because they're more afraid of, in the old days, it was the Soviet Union and China that they were afraid of. And so they wanted a U.S. military umbrella, and that's why the troops are there. It's because of fear. Likewise, the Germans, not that enthusiastic about having GIs around, but compared to the possibility of a Soviet occupation, it seemed like a good idea. And you will note that with the fall of the Soviet Union, U.S. bases in Germany being rolled up, not going to be any U.S. troops there. So the only way you get these post-conflict bases is if the country that was conquered is afraid of somebody else. And who exactly are the Iraqis afraid of? No offense to any Iraqis in the room, but they were the ones that everybody else was afraid of in the region. The Iraqi government in Baghdad, which is now dominated by the Islamic Supreme Council of Iraq, formed in Tehran, not afraid of Iran. There's nobody else in the region that they're afraid of. So I don't foresee them being willing to put up with U.S. troops in the aftermath. And in fact, they put it in the text of the Status of Forces Agreement that Parliament passed that there would be no U.S. troops. So Obama is going to have to push back against some of his own military advisors on this issue and really get us out of Iraq. And that's the only way that we're going to begin to repair some of our relations with the Muslim world. You know, talking about polls, the Saudis were polled and they were asked, would you like better relations with the United States? 64% say yes. These are the dreaded Wahhabis, right, that the American politicians are always talking about and denouncing as the root of all trouble. 64% say they want better relations with the United States. And if you ask them, how would you get those? The number one thing the United States could do to cause better relations with the Republic of Saudi Arabia, get out of Iraq. This is huge. In 2000, it's hard to remember the 2000, before all this happened, 75% of Indonesians said they had a favorable or very favorable view of the United States. It's the largest Muslim country in the world. 75% have a favorable or unfavorable view, favorable or very favorable view of the United States in 2000. It now hovers around 20%. The United States has lost enormous esteem in the Muslim world, which turns into real deficits in economic and diplomatic and military relations. In Turkey, 2000, 56% of Turks have a favorable or very favorable view of the United States. Turkey is a NATO ally. Today, 9%. And if you know Turks, a lot of them are very secular people, very pro-West. This is, to have 9% of Turks, I mean, this is now on the same level with, like, Palestinians. It's an incredible fall from grace. And it has implications. Like, the Turks refused to let the United States go through Turkey on its way to Iraq. It has, as I said, there are dangers of, this goes on, there are dangers of boycotts. And it's not as if the United States doesn't need the Middle East and its resources. Obama's other big challenge, besides getting out of Iraq and restoring civil liberties and the Constitution in the United States, lies in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And you know, it is said that President Roosevelt, when he was elected, met with some of his constituencies and said, "Thank you for electing me. Now put pressure on me." And one of the things that the public has to do with President Obama now is to put pressure on him. Because once you become president, you know, you forget about meeting in the diner with the people in Cedar Rapids and asking them for their vote, or staying with a couple in New Hampshire, as you do in the campaign. Now you're dealing with the big boys. Now General Electric is coming to you, and ExxonMobil, and people with billions and billions of dollars, or at least people who pretend to have billions and billions of dollars, and there are some of those too, like Madoff. But in any case, you get the big pressure. And I think we have to encourage President-elect Obama to back away from some of the things, and some of the things his team has said with regard to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Obama began saying that he would bomb al-Qaeda targets in Pakistan unilaterally if we had intelligence on al-Qaeda being there, and the Pakistani military was not forthcoming with permission for us to operate. Actually, Bush heard that and said, "Oh, gee, why didn't I think of that?" and started doing it. So the United States is an ally of Pakistan, but has been bombing it. And surreal things were said during the campaign. Like, at one point, they asked Obama, well, would you nuke Pakistan? If you knew, like, where bin Laden was, would you nuke Waziristan? Obama said, well, no, I wouldn't do that. And Hillary came out and attacked him. So what do you mean you wouldn't do that? Of course we would nuke Waziristan. I mean, they're talking about deploying a nuclear bomb on an ally. I mean, not on Islamabad, but on the soil of Pakistan. And people in Pakistan have been upset. The opinion polls show this, about this kind of talk and about the infringement on national sovereignty. And people say, well, Pakistan is not doing it, so we have to do it. Pakistan, nobody reports this in the press, or it's not even focused on. Pakistan's military has been fighting a campaign in the northern tribal agency of Bajaur, in which thousands of people have been killed or injured, and 300,000 people have been displaced and made homeless. I mean, there are Pakistani refugees in Afghanistan. This is a reversal of the tendency of the last 30 years. So it's not true that the Pakistani military is not doing anything in the tribal areas. In fact, what do they want? Like a genocide? There's a big operation there. And it's not entirely clear to me what is gained by these frontal assaults on tribal peoples, and how, you know, the US political discourse now has it that our security in the United States is dependent on what happens in the tribal agencies of Pakistan. I mean, is that plausible? Let's say there are 1,000 Al-Qaeda who escaped there and hiding out in Waziristan and Bajaur and places like that. What could they really do from there? And in what way would attacking those places constantly yield better security for the United States? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think the idea that we send in more and more troops into Pushtun areas of southern Afghanistan and use them for search and destroy missions and so forth is also very unlikely to end well. I mean, isn't that what the Soviet Union did? How would that work? So I think we have to press President-elect Obama to back off some of these things. And despite Hillary now being Secretary of State, she is strictly to be told no nuking of anybody. That didn't actually get her elected, so she just has to give up on that. So I think the things that were said at the beginning by Mr. Al-Marayati should be kept in mind. We've elected a president. He's a president. We may think of him as a hero, but remember, most of his heroism has been in his promise. He hasn't actually done anything yet. And we will be disappointed by some of the things that he does, without any doubt. We now have to have a dialogue with our president and with the new administration. We have to put pressure on them. We have to lobby them. We have to organize. And this is the wonderful thing about MPAC. And I want to congratulate you all that you care enough to come out, you care enough to be organized, you care enough to speak out, and at some risk sometimes. And without that, we don't have a democracy. Unless the people are willing to organize and speak out, we have an elective dictatorship. You know, and we can just elect a president and leave him there to do whatever he likes, and then we'll end up certainly being disappointed. So we have to organize to pressure the Obama administration to follow its best instincts. And where its instincts already aren't very good, we have to pressure it to back off and go in the right direction. The good thing is that the hysteria that was produced by 9/11, and which was intended to be produced by 9/11 in the United States and the Muslim world, is very clearly short-lived and is dying out. The main reaction of the American public these years later, 7 years later to 9/11, is to elect a president with the middle name Hussein. And there's therefore an opportunity now to go forward. People realize Al-Qaeda is not a world historical threat. It is a small and fringe and probably dying terrorist organization, which is as much of a threat to the government of Saudi Arabia or Egypt as it is to that of the United States. And then the question is, well, what are the bilateral and relations of the United States and the Muslim world going to look like? And there's a great deal of hope. Actually, Despite the hopes for energy independence, and which may be attainable in a century, they're not attainable in 10 years, and that's another thing that Obama is wrong about. And the fact is that the United States is going to be more and more dependent on the oil-producing and gas-producing regions of the Muslim world in the Persian Gulf and Central Asia than ever before in the coming 20 years. And the opportunities for cooperation in developing solar energy, for instance, are great. And people don't know, but the United Arab Emirates is now creating a low carbon or no carbon city called Masdar, which would have no carbon footprint. And it is ironically the very riches that come from the fossil fuels that might allow this way forward. It is that kind of project with which the Obama administration should be cooperating if we're to get to our goal ultimately of clean, renewable alternative energy. Ironically enough, the capital for that and some of the impetus for that might well come from the hydrocarbon countries of the Muslim world. So I think there's every potential here for a bright future, a future in which the United States and the Muslim world are even more so than now partners. And I just want to leave you with something that Benjamin Franklin said. He created a non-denominational center in Philadelphia in which any person of any sect or persuasion could come and preach. And so it could be a deist or a Quaker or a Congregationalist, anyone. And when he set it up, Ben Franklin wrote in his autobiography that even the Mufti of Istanbul would be welcome to come and preach at that center, and that the public would be open to learning things as it certainly would from him. This is the principle upon which the United States is founded. And although there's a little bit of prejudice, involved in the idea that even the Mufti of Istanbul is somebody from whom we could learn, this is the 18th century we're talking about here, which was not, an enlightened necessarily period about Islam. And I think that the best way forward in the United States is not only to worry about democratization of the Middle East and sort of what can we impose on the Middle East or do for the Middle East, what can we get out of it, but we should go back to Benjamin Franklin's thesis and think, well, what could we learn from the Muslim world as Americans, and how could that make America better? Thank you very much.
Okay. Is this okay? Thank you. Thank you, Professor Cole, Mr. Ahmed Younis, Dr. Maher Hathout, for very enriching presentations. We have a number of questions that we'd like to go through, as many of them as possible. The first question is, how significant is it that President-elect Obama intends to speak to Muslims from a Muslim capital? What should he say?
I think it is at least leaked that the president-elect is planning to address Muslims from a Muslim capital. It was not leaked which capital he's going to choose. Nonetheless, I think if it happens, it will have a positive impact on the Muslim world, because as we heard from the two speakers, the ailment of the Muslim-American relationship is, speaking as a physician, is acute. Acute means happened recently, intensely, but it can be cured. And if he steps in now and speaks to Muslims with respect and mutuality from a capital that is inhabited by majority of Muslims, I think it can be a great step forward.
Well, I would just add to that I think there are some criteria that should go into picking the capital. One criteria that I would think of is ensuring that it is a Muslim majority society that adheres to democratic principles and has set up a government amongst the people that yields freedoms for minorities and yields, a democratic experience for all. In my mind, a lecture in Jakarta, Indonesia would probably make sense. The other criteria that could be used is a Muslim majority society in the Arab world that is concerned with and investing in the socio-economic development of Muslims globally. And in my mind, Doha, Qatar functions as an excellent opportunity for that type of a lecture. But for Barack Obama to go to a Muslim country where there are no freedoms for minorities, Muslim or non-Muslim, where there is no vision to the disposition of the people of the region or of the global Muslim community, then we are regressing to a place where we reward ignorance, and we don't want to be doing that.
Could I just say that, for Obama to go to a Muslim capital and address the Muslim world is praiseworthy, but we need to get away from the Rovian, Karl Rove is Bush's campaign advisor, Rovian idea of symbol over substance. And I really don't think it matters so much if he goes someplace and addresses people. It matters what he says, what policies he's going to adopt. I mean, what would it matter he went to Cairo and addressed the Muslim people? People don't realize that Bush went to Cairo last spring. Does anybody even know that he went? So why? Because he didn't change any policies that matter to the Muslim publics. Unless Obama is willing to step up and get a just and equitable resolution of Israel-Palestine, unless he's willing to work with Muslim publics, maybe behind the scenes and in more subtle ways, to promote the rule of law, unless he's willing to change U.S. policies in Afghanistan, then that he addressed them is all very well and good, but the question is what will be the response to the substance of what he has to say. And I don't think that you make foreign policy with photo ops, which is the way it's been done the last 8 years.
I totally agree with that. Nonetheless, the mere step is positive, not negative. This is what I meant. No matter which, there are places will be better than places, and there are speeches that will be better than speeches. And I certainly would hope to see substance to come from it. I will not necessarily adhere to the policy of the government, but more to the sentiment of the people. I take, for example, the Egyptian situation, where the sentiment of the people is very healthy vis-a-vis democracy and the progress, but the government is not. I feel a message from that podium can be far-reaching and very important. I would not suggest the form that was performed here, inviting Muslims to the White House for iftar in Ramadan or Eid celebration, which was good at the first time. But after second, third, fifth, it became ridiculous. And our organization stopped going, as a matter of fact, because it became ceremonial and the propaganda to serve the wrong way that is being committed against Muslims.
Okay, let's go to another topic. Obama kept Muslims at a distance throughout his campaign. Most consider this a strategy to be able to get into office. What evidence is there that now that Obama will be president, will in fact work openly and supportively with Muslims? And a couple of other questions along the same line. U.S. administrations, past and present, always neglected to include Muslim Americans on their staff and advisors. How can we reverse that trend? Mr. Younis?
Yeah, Dr. Hathout said they're going to get me fired. Look, I mean, oppression brings sobriety and maturity in the perception of what success is possible. Black folk in America were not expecting Barack Obama to win the white vote in South Carolina and then holding him to the proposition that he's not integrating black folk into America because he wasn't able to overcome 250 years of history in South Carolina. I don't believe that American Muslims were looking for Barack Obama to become the champion of Islam and Muslims and to do the job of Salam Al-Marayati. That's Salam Al-Marayati's job, not Barack Obama's job. So for us to expect the president to be an activist for our community is very immature and very short-sighted. For us to demand through the structure of engagement that you have succeeded in building for the last 22 years, an equality, a seat at the table, a voice in the policy discussions, etc., that is a very American thing and a very necessary thing for us to do. But I fear, just from already our first two questions, that we have marinated in this place where we are, Barack Obama needs to do this, and this guy needs to do this, and how come this guy's not doing this? And I totally disagree with Dr. Hathout. I've always disagreed with Dr. Hathout. There is a Christmas celebration every single year at the White House. It has absolutely nothing to do with US policy towards Christians at home or abroad. We have succeeded in becoming a part of a culture. Some of our culture is frivolous and substanceless, and some of our culture is substantive and important. But to be part and parcel of these experiences is a very important thing. They do not substitute substance. Giving a speech in a Muslim majority society where we see the pictures of Berlin with Muslim youth in hundreds of thousands on the streets chanting support for the President of the United States is not something that we want in lieu of a change of US foreign policy that brings more equality and respect to Muslims globally. But it is a necessary component of a rapprochement that is needed for our country to change its disposition vis-a-vis the global Muslim community. So, more about what we can do and less about what we're waiting for Barack Obama to do.
Just go ahead, Professor Cole.
Apparently what you get is Ray LaHood, who's an Arab American.
Department of Transportation.
Yeah, you get the Department of Transportation. I think the short answer is that the reason for which these appointments are made of representatives of ethnic groups in an administration is that it's reward for support, organization, and money. And where some groups have been very active and very generous, they get more reward. So if the Muslim American community wants to have a prominent position in US administrations, they're going to have to step up to be very active, visible, and also generous to those campaigns. And one of the problems of the Muslim American community in the past few years has been, understandably maybe, a little bit afraid to be too visible in politics. And also, they have been very deeply split. I mean, it was a 60-40 split, Republican versus Democrat. Well, you have to pick a side, guys.
Okay, two more questions. One, how would an Obama administration deal differently from 9/11 if it were to happen under the Obama administration's watch? And how would it deal with the Palestinian issue differently from the Bush administration?
You want me to answer the second part or the first part?
Either one. Just
okay. I think I put things in big lumps so that people who know more can detail them. We need a restoration, a healing of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That should be the demand of all decent Americans. Number two, globally, we need to restore the respect to international law. If we address those two big titles, other things will come underneath naturally. For example, in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, or I like to call it dealing with aggression in this area, I think the administration, I will not say be even-handed or be this or love the Palestinians like we love the Israelis. I don't subscribe to that. But there is international law. There are United Nations resolutions. There are Security Council resolutions. There are norms of civilization that will be shamed by what is happening of starving the people of Gaza. These things, these ABC things of human decent civilization should be addressed, and under these titles, other problems can be tackled. And I totally agree with my two colleagues that we don't expect Obama to do that. We ought to do it and push him to do it. Otherwise, we'll create down the road, instead of a Republican Bush, we'll create a Democrat Bush. And we should not do that.
Looking back on Napoleon's failed invasion of Egypt, please offer your thoughts, perspectives, and predictions about post-imperial reconstruction in Iraq.
Well, the questioner is kindly referring to my book on Napoleon's Egypt, which I put forward as, the first of many debacles of Western imperialism in the Muslim world in the modern period. And of course, the French in Egypt kind of flailed around for 3 years and faced constant revolts, failed to really get local people on their side, and ultimately were expelled by a joint expeditionary force of British Navy and Ottoman land troops. And I think that the situation is slightly different in Iraq in the sense that the British weren't the only player in the 18th century. The French faced the British and also the Ottomans as great powers. It was a multipolar world. And one of our misfortunes at this very moment is that we live in a unipolar world. The United States is the sole superpower, and it can do virtually anything it likes. And there's nobody who would stand up to it because the cost would be so high. And it is the unipolar moment that allowed Bush to go into Iraq. Because if you think back, if it were 1985, the Soviets had a hand in Baghdad, and they would just have said, no, you can't invade our client. And we wouldn't have done it because it would have risked nuclear war and so forth. So it is the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States' emergence as the sole superpower that allowed the Iraq debacle, and therefore the only check on U.S. policy in Iraq was from the Iraqi people. And the Iraqi people mobilized on several fronts. They got up the Sunni Arabs primarily, but also the Shiites of the Sadr movement got up insurgencies against the U.S., which were costly to Bush. But then, because Bush did allow them to organize and was pushed into allowing open and free elections, they organized politically to the point where they got a parliament that could vote the U.S. out of Iraq, which is what just happened. The American pundit class doesn't seem to realize this, but the Iraqis organized to vote the U.S. out of Iraq and on a short timetable. So it's a different way of ending than happened in Egypt, which ended with the military defeat of the French. The U.S. was not militarily defeated in Iraq. But I would say it was defeated both by low-intensity struggles and by politics, and it shows that in the contemporary world, the people can organize to thwart a superpower.
I'll use my mentor's microphone. See that way I'm more powerful. So I slammed it on the floor. Salam, I want to challenge the last question. If we as Muslims in America continue to see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a prerequisite to the fixing of America's beef with Muslims globally, we will never succeed. The situation of the Palestinian people is the greatest tragedy of modern time. And it is something that we must engage actively to change the reality of. But the Muslims of the world want schools, they want clean water, they want jobs, they want the ability to live in freedom and democracy according to their organic understandings of these concepts. And we cannot allow the policy class in America to look at you as a representative of this community and say, oh yeah, you're beefing about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Nothing's going to happen about that. See you in 6 months. No. It is one of many issues that the Muslims of the world tell us in the data they are concerned with. When you ask Muslims around the world, what is the number one thing that America can do to begin to respect Muslims globally, they do not say fix the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They say create good quality jobs. It just so happens that every other person in the world that we poll in 150 countries says the exact same answer. So there is a role for our country to play in aiding the betterment of Muslims globally that is not fundamentally intertwined with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and can go hand in hand with a very important movement amongst the American people of all faiths to bring justice to the Palestinian people. These cannot be seen as an either or, as it was presented in that question.
Yeah, this is why I framed it of restore the respect to international law. The international law will flinch about what's happening in Palestine and in Gaza in particular. And I will not say Muslims need schools in Jakarta. They do. But we need bread and wheat in Gaza, and air, and electricity. So I will not put it as a parochial issue. It's a global issue. And if America claims that it is the leader of the world, go ahead and lead. Don't take I lead in that portion of the world and ignore that portion of the world because I have a strong lobby internally. No, go across and lead and do the things that ought to be done regardless. And we keep hiding behind the strength or the power of the Jewish lobby in America. This is immoral. We know, we live with Jewish people. And the Jewish people in America are not a lobby. There are people of them, good numbers, are very upset about what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Palestine. This is a human global issue. If we wanted to lead, we lead and we act as leaders, not as gangsters. I think...
Running out of time, but just a question on one of your points, Dr. Hathout, regarding Muslims serving America as opposed to serving Muslim issues. There is an idea that it is incumbent upon a Muslim to serve Muslims first, then others later. Is this a valid, religiously based notion, or is it a misconception?
Number one, when we say serve in what? I will not go and serve a white, I don't mean any racism or disrespect. I will not go to a white, well-entrenched, group and say, I'm going to serve you on the issue of civil liberties. They don't need me. They are okay. But when I come to the issue of civil liberties, the first group I will select here will be Muslims, will be Latinos, will be African Americans, because this is where the service is needed. And I'll say I'm serving those first, not because they are my gang, but because this is where the injustice is inflicting, and this is where the service is needed. When I come to if serving the Muslims means that everything the Muslims do is correct or should justified or should be apologetic about it or hide it, I'll say no. I live in a country and I want the country to be safe, intact, growing, and great. And I will not, and this is what the Quran teaches us. Don't let the animosity to people or of people serve you away from justice. I'll try to serve for the common good of all people, and this will not exclude Muslims, of course. It will include, when I say I want a better America, me, Maher Hathout, when I say it, part of what I mean is a better Muslim community. I want a better country that makes the Muslim community naturally in a better position. I don't want America of discrimination, America of oppression, America of criminality and corruption. I want a good America where me as a community, as a Muslim community, and me as Muslim values will flourish, and we'll have a room around the table.
Closing thoughts. Professor Cole?
Well, as I said, I think that the next 4 years are an opportunity, not an accomplishment. An opportunity for various groups in the United States of a progressive turn of mind to organize for greater civil liberties, for a restoration of our Bill of Rights, for a different kind of U.S. foreign policy. And I think the United States works because it is a cooperative venture of a lot of different kinds of people. And the Muslim American community, because of the unique disabilities under which it has been put in the Bush administration, has a prime opportunity here to make the most positive contribution to righting the American ship of state.
And that opportunity can only be taken advantage of if we as Muslims adhere to very basic Quranic and prophetic principles. That God will not bring change unless we as a nation change, we as individuals change, we as institutions change. And so long as we're calibrating our compass towards justice and God, we will necessarily be able to maximize on that opportunity.
Thank you very much to our panel for a very enriching discussion.
I'm not allowed a closing.
Yeah, okay. You're going to talk more later.
Okay, we close.
You always have the last word. And then there are a couple of questions in terms of what MPAC is doing to get more Muslims involved in public service. The answer to that is come to the banquet and you'll find out the answer. So, inshallah, many of you will join us tonight.
Come to the banquet and support MPAC.
Yeah.